A flick of the wrist. That's all it took for billionaire Cole Smith to dismiss a person, with a careless toss of $2 onto a $100 bill. He could erase a face, a moment of kindness, an entire human being from his reality. He lived in a world of 9-figure deals of corporate takeovers that shifted skylines, a world where people were either assets or obstacles. But what happens when the obstacle you dismiss, the person you deem utterly insignificant, turns out to be the one person holding the key to your entire future? This isn't a story about romance. It's a story about reckoning. It's about the day a titan of industry discovered that the most valuable asset in the world can't be bought, and the person he ignored was about to become his boss. The air in Aurelia, a Michelin-starred restaurant nestled in a quiet, fiercely expensive corner of Lower Manhattan, was thick with the scent of truffle oil and quiet ambition. Conversations were murmurs, the clinking of Christofle silverware against porcelain, a delicate symphony of wealth. At the best table, the one with the panoramic view of the twinkling city lights, sat Cole Smith. At 34, Cole was a predator in a bespoke Brioni suit. His company Vortex Innovations had devoured the tech landscape, specializing in predictive data analytics that made him both feared and indispensable. His eyes, the color of a stormy sea, were currently narrowed not at his dining companion, but at the deal memo laid out beside his plate. His companion, a nervous junior partner from a rival firm he was about to acquire, was sweating through his Zegna shirt. The valuation is non-negotiable. Peterson. Cole said, his voice a low, smooth baritone that cut through the restaurant's polite hum. He didn't look up from the papers. My algorithm has run the numbers 37 different ways. This is the price. Take it, or I'll find someone who will by the time my dessert arrives. Their waitress approached the table with the fluid, unobtrusive grace of someone who had mastered the art of being invisible. Her name was Natalie. She had a calm, observant face, and her simple black uniform was immaculate. She moved with a quiet efficiency that Cole, had he bothered to notice, might have respected. "Excuse me, Mr. Smith," she said softly. "Your water." She refilled his glass from a crystal carafe. As she leaned in, her gaze flickered to the expensive fountain pen resting beside Cole's hand. It was a Mont Blanc, a gift to himself after his first billion. A tiny, almost imperceptible bead of black ink was pooling around the nib. He was about to pick it up to sign the preliminary agreement, a gesture of finality to crush Peterson's last hope of negotiation. Sir Natalie interrupted gently, just as his fingers brushed the pen. Cole's head snapped up, his eyes flashing with irritation. He hated interruptions. They were inefficiency snags in the smooth fabric of his control. "What is it?" He clipped his tone, making it clear she was less than a gnat buzzing at his ear. She didn't flinch. Instead, she offered a discreet, knowing smile. "Your pen," she said, her voice still a murmur. "It's leaking. It would be a shame to ruin such an important document." She gestured subtly to a small, elegant ballpoint pen she had produced from her apron pocket. "May I offer you this, just in case?" For a split second, Cole was thrown. He saw the smudge of ink on the tablecloth where the nib had rested. He saw Peterson's eyes widen slightly in surprise. The waitress had just saved him from a moment of embarrassing messiness, a small crack in his armor of perfection. She had been absurd, proactive, and thoughtful. Any other man might have offered a word of thanks, a nod of appreciation. Cole Smith was not any other man. He stared at her for a cold, dismissive second, his brain processing her not as a person, but as a function. The function preventing a minor inconvenience had been performed. He snatched the cheap ballpoint from her hand without a word, turning back to the documents. He signed his name with a flourish, the sharp, angular script, a testament to his unyielding nature. Peterson, defeated, mumbled his assent. The deal was done. Natalie quietly retrieved the leaking Mont Blanc, placing it on a clean napkin to prevent further damage. She refilled their waters again and ished as silently as she had appeared. When the bill came, Cole didn't even look at it. He pulled a crisp $100 bill and 2 crumpled $1 bills from his wallet and dropped them into the leather folder. A $2 tip on a $500 meal. It wasn't an oversight. It was a message. A message that her service, her kindness, her very existence was worth less than the lint in his pocket. He hadn't just ignored her. He had quantified her insignificance. He pushed his chair back, the legs, scraping softly on the polished oak, and walked out of Aurelia without a backward glance, the woman who had helped him already forgotten. Cole's penthouse was less a home and more a statement. Occupying the entire top floor of a new, impossibly slender skyscraper on Park Avenue, its floor-to-ceiling windows offered a god's-eye view of Manhattan. The city sprawled below him, a glittering circuit board of light and power that he felt he could manipulate with the flick of a switch. The decor was minimalist, brutalist, even all polished concrete, blackened steel, and vast empty spaces. It was the home of a man who valued function over comfort and power over sentiment. He stood before the window swirling a glass of Macallan 50, the amber liquid catching the city lights. The acquisition of Peterson's firm was a minor victory, a footnote in his grander strategy. The real prize, the one that occupied his every waking thought, was the partnership with Finch Holdings. Finch Holdings was old money, a real estate and luxury hospitality empire built over generations. They were the antithesis of Vortex Innovations. Where Vortex was new, disruptive, and digital, Finch was established, traditional, and tangible. They owned the ground his skyscraper was built on. They owned iconic hotels, exclusive resorts, and commercial properties that were the bedrock of the city's wealth. Cole didn't need their money. He needed their legitimacy. Their portfolio was the key to his next venture, a global AI-driven hospitality experience that would revolutionize the industry. Fusing his predictive analytics with their physical assets would create an unassailable monopoly. The deal was everything. It was his legacy. His phone buzzed. It was his second-in-command, Ben Carter. Ben was older, calmer, the necessary ballast to Cole's soaring, often reckless ambition. "The Finch papers are ready." Ben's voice came through the phone's speaker. "Their legal team sent over the final draft. It's all there, just as we negotiated. The 50-50 split the board seats, the operational control for Vortex, on the tech side." Any surprises, Cole asked, his eyes still fixed on the city below. "Just one. They've confirmed the final partner who'll be co-chairing the joint venture with you. It's not Robert Finch himself." Cole turned from the window, a flicker of interest in his eyes. Robert Finch was the patriarch, a shrewd, respected figure in his late 60s. "Who is it then, his son?" "No son. It's listed as N. Finch. The initial is all we have. They've been very quiet about this person. All I know is that they're being given an enormous amount of authority. They'll be your direct counterpart, Cole. Your partner." Cole scoffed, taking a sip of the scotch. Nepotism. Old money at its finest. Some kid fresh out of Wharton given the keys to the kingdom. "Doesn't matter. We'll run circles around them. As long as Robert is happy and the assets are in play, this N. Finch can play with their new title all they want. I'll be the one running the show. I wouldn't be so sure Ben cautioned. The Finches don't do anything without a reason. My sources say this new partner has been personally groomed by Robert for years. They say this person is the future of the company. The future is data, Ben. The future is me, Cole said, with unshakable certainty. Book the final signing. Their main boardroom. I want to look Robert in the eye when we seal this, and have a background file on this N. Finch on my desk by morning. I want to know everything. Their school, their hobbies, what they eat for breakfast. I don't like unknowns. Will do. Ben said, a note of weariness in his voice. He knew this side of Cole all too well. The obsessive need for control, the reduction of people to data points. It was what made him a genius. But it was also his greatest blind spot. Cole ended the call and finished his drink. He glanced at his suit jacket draped over a cold steel chair. He remembered the ink-stained napkin in his pocket. He pulled it out, the expensive Mont Blanc resting on it. He'd have to buy a new one. He tossed the pen napkin and all into a waste bin. Then he looked back at the city. His city. He felt nothing but the cold, satisfying hum of power. The memory of the waitress, the quiet restaurant, the small act of kindness, it hadn't just been forgotten. In the grand, complex algorithm of his life, it had never been registered as a data point worth storing. The staff entrance to Aurelia was in a grim, narrow alley that smelled of bleach and discarded truffle peelings. Natalie Finch pushed the heavy steel door open and stepped out into the cool night air. The city's cacophony. A sudden shock after the hushed reverence of the restaurant. She leaned against the brick wall, untying the knot of her apron and letting out a long, slow breath. For 8 hours, she had been Natalie the waitress. She had been a pair of hands, a polite voice, an invisible presence. She had endured condescending glances, impatient finger snaps, and the breathtaking arrogance of men like Cole Smith. The $2 tip didn't anger her. It fascinated her. It was such a clear, concise statement of his character. He hadn't tipped out of malice. He had tipped out of a complete and utter lack of consideration. To him, she was not a person who had performed a service well, but a function that was no longer required. She walked a few blocks, the city lights painting stripes across the pavement, before turning into a private underground garage. The attendant, a cheerful man named George, tipped his hat. "Evening, Ms. Finch." "Evening, George," she replied warmly. "How's your daughter's recital practice going? She's a natural, Ms. Finch." "Thanks for asking." Natalie smiled and walked to her car. It wasn't a flashy Ferrari or a stately Rolls-Royce. It was a sleek, dark grey Audi A8, a car that spoke of quiet confidence, not screaming wealth. She slid into the leather seat, the scent of the restaurant clinging to her clothes, and pulled out her phone. She dialed her father. "How was the front line tonight, sweetheart?" Robert Finch's voice was warm, a comforting rumble. Natalie laughed, a genuine musical sound. Enlightening as always. "I think our new reservation system is causing a bottleneck at the host stand, and the sommeliers are definitely pushing the Chateau Margaux a little too hard. We can optimize. That's my girl. Always seeing the details." "Anything else?" Natalie paused, thinking of Cole Smith's cold eyes. "I met our new partner tonight," she said, her voice casual. There was a moment of silence on the other end. "You met Cole Smith?" "He was dining at Aurelia." "He was. Closed a big acquisition at table 7. Very decisive, very focused." She chose her words carefully. And her father prompted, knowing his daughter better than anyone. He knew her silences often spoke louder than her words, and he's exactly as his profile suggests, she said, navigating the Audi out of the garage and into the stream of Manhattan traffic. Ruthless, brilliant, and utterly blind to anyone he doesn't consider on his level. He has a leaking Mont Blanc, by the way, and he tipped me $2 on a $500 check. Robert Finch sighed. Natalie, you don't have to keep doing this. You've been working shifts across a dozen of our properties for 6 months. You've proven your point. You understand this business from the ground up, better than any executive I've ever hired. It's not about proving a point anymore. Dad, she said, her expression serious as she stopped at a red light. It's about understanding the soul of this company. Our employees are not cogs in a machine. Our guests are not just data points for an algorithm to process. They're people. I needed to remember what that felt like to be on the other side of the table before I sit down at the head of it, especially if I'm sitting opposite a man like Mr. Smith. This was the truth of it. Natalie Finch, holder of an MBA from Stanford and the sole heir to the Finch empire, had spent the last 6 months as a waitress, a concierge, a valet, and a housekeeper. It was her own condition before she would accept the title of COO and step into the partnership with Vortex Innovations. She refused to lead people whose jobs she didn't fundamentally understand and respect. So what's the verdict on our new partner? Robert asked. Natalie thought for a moment. She remembered his dismissive snatch of her pen, the coldness in his eyes that wasn't anger, but a complete lack of recognition. He hadn't seen a person. He'd seen an object. The verdict, she said slowly, is that his technology might be brilliant, but his humanity is deeply flawed. And in the hospitality business, that is a fatal liability. He's a titan in a glass tower, Dad. And I think he's about to find out that sometimes the most important people are the ones on the ground floor. She pulled up to her elegant but understated brownstone in the West Village. She was no longer Natalie the waitress. She was N. Finch, the silent partner, the unknown variable in Cole Smith's perfectly calculated equation. And their first official meeting, she mused, was going to be very, very interesting. The 3 days leading up to the final meeting with Finch Holdings were a blur of frenetic high-stakes preparation for the Vortex team. For Cole Smith, it was a war game, and he was its grandmaster. The Finch Holdings boardroom was the battlefield, and he intended to walk in with an arsenal of unassailable data and strategic dominance. His office, which occupied the highest floor of the Vortex Tower, was a testament to his philosophy. One entire wall was a smart screen, currently displaying a complex web of data points, market projections, and financial models related to the Finch partnership. In the center of it all was a shadowed silhouette with the name N. Finch underneath it. Anything Cole asked, not turning from the screen. Ben Carter sighed, scrolling through his tablet. It's like chasing a ghost, Cole. We've run every search imaginable. Financial records, academic histories, social media. There is no prominent N. Finch associated with the family in the public domain. No Nicholas, no Nathan, no Noah. That's impossible. Cole snapped, pacing in front of the screen. A person with this much power, this much control over a multi-billion-dollar deal doesn't just materialize out of thin air. They have a history, a paper trail. Dig deeper. I want to know who I'm dealing with. Maybe that's the point, Ben suggested, looking up from his tablet. Robert Finch is an old-school player. He values privacy. Maybe he's kept this person under wraps deliberately. A secret weapon. Cole scoffed at the idea. Secret weapons are for spy novels, Ben, not for corporate governance. It's an heir, pampered, protected, and probably unqualified. Their first move will be to try and prove they belong, probably by challenging my operational authority on the tech integration. We need to be ready to shut that down from the first handshake. He tapped the screen, bringing up a psychological profile his team had generated based on the scant information they had. It was mostly guesswork, extrapolating from Robert Finch's own business-style conservative risk-averse valuing legacy over disruption. We'll frame the presentation around legacy. Cole strategized, his voice gaining momentum. We're not replacing the Finch legacy, we're future-proofing it. We're honoring their history by ensuring their dominance for the next century. We'll use words like tradition, heritage, and synergy. The kid will eat it up. It will soothe their ego and make them feel like they're part of a grand continuum, not just a bystander to my revolution. Ben remained silent for a moment, an uneasy feeling settling in his gut. Cole, what if you're wrong? What if this person isn't some kid? What if they're sharp? What if they have a completely different vision? Then they're still wrong, Cole said flatly. Because my vision is backed by data, by numbers, by the inevitable march of progress. You can't argue with gravity, Ben. And in the world of business, my algorithm is gravity. This N. Finch will fall in line just like everyone else. His arrogance was a physical force in the room, bending the reality around him to his will. He saw the world as a series of problems that his intellect and resources could solve. People were simply variables in that equation. He had no room in his calculations for humility, for surprise, for the unquantifiable power of a human being who had seen his true face when he thought no one of importance was watching. On the morning of the meeting, Cole was a picture of perfect predatory confidence. He wore a custom-tailored Tom Ford suit, the color of midnight, his shoes were polished to a mirror shine, and his watch, a Patek Philippe Grand Complication, was a subtle declaration of his status. He felt the familiar thrill of the final conquest, the moment before the king is toppled and the board is swept clean. As they rode the silent high-speed elevator up to the top floor of the Finch Holdings tower, Ben made one last attempt. Just keep an open mind today, Cole. These people operate on relationships and respect as much as they do on profit margins. Cole simply smiled, a thin, humorless expression. Respect is earned, Ben. And in about 10 minutes, N. Finch is going to learn exactly how much of my respect they've earned. He stepped out of the elevator into the opulent wood-paneled lobby of the executive floor. A receptionist led them toward a pair of massive oak doors. Cole could feel the thrum of victory in his veins. He was about to meet the ghost in the machine, the final insignificant variable. He was about to put a name to the shadow on his screen, and then promptly put them in their place. The doors swung open. The Finch Holdings boardroom was designed to inspire awe. It was a cathedral of commerce, with a 30-foot-long mahogany table polished to a liquid sheen, and a single vast window that looked down on Central Park. The room smelled of old leather lemon oil, and most potently power. At the far end of the table stood Robert Finch. He was exactly as Cole had expected, tall, impeccably dressed in a classic Savile Row suit, with a warm but shrewd smile and eyes that had seen the rise and fall of countless Wall Street titans. Beside him stood another man, presumably a lawyer. "Cole Robert," said his voice a welcoming baritone, as he walked forward, his hand extended. "A pleasure to finally be putting the last piece in place. This is a historic day for both our companies. The pleasure is all mine." Robert Cole replied, his handshake firm and confident. "I agree. We're about to build the future." He gave a professional nod to his own second-in-command. "This is my head of strategy, Ben Carter." Pleasantries were exchanged. Cole's eyes scanned the room, looking for the young, untested heir he had so meticulously prepared for. He saw a few other board members, all in their late 50s or 60s. There was no sign of a 20-something Wharton graduate. "It seems we're just waiting on one more person," Cole said smoothly, a hint of impatience in his tone. "Your partner, N. Finch." Robert's smile widened. "Ah, yes. Of course. You haven't been formally introduced. They insisted on being here on time, of course. Always punctual." He turned slightly toward the large window where a figure had been standing, looking out at the park, their back to the room. "My partner is right here." The figure turned, and the world tilted on its axis. Time seemed to warp for Cole Smith. The air in his lungs turned to ice. The confident smile on his face didn't just fade. It shattered like a pane of glass hit by a stone. The blood drained from his face, leaving a cold, clammy pallor. It was her, the waitress from Aurelia. She wasn't wearing the simple black uniform and apron anymore. She was dressed in a tailored, elegant navy blue pantsuit that conveyed authority and grace. Her hair, previously tied back in a simple functional ponytail, was now styled in a sophisticated but understated manner. Her face was the same calm, intelligent obsert, but the context was so violently impossibly different that his brain struggled to reconcile the two images. She walked toward him, her steps measured and confident on the plush carpet. Her expression was perfectly unnervingly neutral. There was no overt sign of triumph, no hint of an "I told you so." There was only a quiet, professional poise that was in that moment more terrifying than any open hostility could ever be. "Cole Smith." Robert Finch said, his voice beaming with paternal pride, completely oblivious to the silent cataclysm unfolding before him. "I'd like you to meet the new Chief Operating Officer of Finch Holdings, my partner in this venture and the future of this company. My daughter, Natalie Finch." Natalie extended her hand. "Mr. Smith." She said, her voice, the same soft, clear tone he remembered from the restaurant. "It's a pleasure to finally meet you officially." Cole just stared. His mind was a maelstrom of confusion and horror. The waitress, the leaked pen, the condescending dismissal, the $2 tip, the entire memory, which he had deemed so insignificant that it was effectively deleted, came roaring back with the force of a tidal wave. It crashed over him, drowning him in a flood of pure, unadulterated humiliation. His hand, which had signed billion-dollar deals without a tremor, felt heavy as lead. He forced himself to lift it, his movements stiff and robotic. He took her offered hand. Her grip was firm, her skin cool. "Ms. Finch." He managed to choke out his voice, sounding strangled and foreign to his own ears. Ben Carter, standing beside him, saw it all. He saw Cole's face drain of color. He saw the flicker of recognition, the dawning horror, and the immediate, desperate attempt to mask it. And in that instant, Ben knew. He didn't know how or when, but he knew that Cole had met this woman before, and that the encounter had not been a good one. Natalie held his gaze for a fraction of a second longer than necessary. In her calm, steady eyes, he saw no anger. He saw no revenge. He saw something far worse. He saw recognition. He saw that she remembered him. She remembered every single detail of his contemptuous dismissal, and she had said nothing. She released his hand and turned to the rest of the room. Well, she said, her voice now crisp and businesslike, as she took her seat at the head of the table directly opposite Cole. "I've reviewed the final proposal from Vortex Innovations. I have some notes. Shall we begin?" Cole sank into his chair, his body moving on autopilot. The master of the universe, the man who controlled everything, had just discovered that the most critical variable in his most important equation was not a ghost. It was the waitress he had treated like dirt. And she was now his partner. The meeting began, but for Cole Smith, the world had been reduced to a roaring in his ears. The meticulously prepared presentation, the one designed to patronize a young heir, was now a script for a horror film in which he was the star fool. He felt Ben nudge him discreetly. It was his cue to speak to open with the grand vision he had so confidently rehearsed. He opened his mouth, but the words felt like ash. "We, at Vortex, believe in the future," he began. His voice strained. He felt dozens of eyes on him, but he could only see one pair, Natalie's. She was looking at him not with malice, but with an unnerving, analytical calm, like a scientist observing a specimen under a microscope. He stumbled through the opening remarks, his usual charisma and commanding presence completely gone. The data points and projections that usually flowed from him with effortless authority now seemed like a foreign language. He was a machine with broken gears grinding and screeching. When it was Natalie's turn to speak, the shift in the room's atmosphere was palpable. "Thank you, Mr. Smith." She began, her tone even and professional. "Your team has compiled an impressive array of data. Your technological vision is without question revolutionary." She paused, letting the compliment hang in the air for a moment, before deftly twisting the knife. However, she continued, opening a leather-bound folio in front of her. "I believe the presentation overlooks the most critical asset in the hospitality industry, the human element." She didn't look at Cole. She addressed the entire board. "For the past 6 months, I've been conducting a comprehensive ground-level audit of our operations. I've worked at the front desk with the housekeeping staff and in our restaurant kitchens. I wasn't an executive on a tour. I was an employee on the payroll." A murmur of surprise went through the room. Robert Finch beamed with pride. Cole felt a fresh wave of nausea. She hadn't just been a waitress that one night. She had been studying his potential battleground for months from the inside. "Your algorithm." "Mr. Smith," she said, finally turning her cool gaze back to him, "can predict a guest's desire for a specific type of pillow. But it cannot predict the impact of a doorman who remembers a guest's name. Your system can optimize room service delivery times, but it cannot quantify the value of a waitress who anticipates a customer's need before they're even aware of it themselves." The reference was so subtle, so perfectly veiled in corporate jargon, that only Cole and perhaps Ben would understand its true devastating meaning. She was using his own dismissive behavior as a case study against his business philosophy right in front of her father and the board. She was dismantling his entire argument using a weapon he had handed her himself. She went on for 20 minutes, dissecting their proposal with surgical precision. She spoke of employee morale, of customer loyalty, built on personal connection, of the intangible magic that made a Finch hotel more than just a collection of rooms. She wasn't rejecting his technology. She was demanding it serve a higher purpose than mere efficiency. She was demanding it serve people. By the time she finished, Cole was mentally shattered. She had not only exposed the flaw in his strategy, but she had done so by demonstrating a far deeper understanding of her own business than he could ever hope to achieve with his data. She wasn't the pampered heir. She was the master. He was the amateur. The meeting concluded with an agreement to reevaluate the human-centric integration points of the proposal. It was a polite corporate phrase for, "Your plan is not good enough. Go back and do it again. But this time, do it right." As people began to file out of the room, Cole remained frozen in his chair. Ben quietly packed his briefcase, his expression grim. "Cole Robert Finch," said, clapping him on the shoulder jovially. "Don't look so grim. My daughter is tough, but she's brilliant. She'll make this partnership stronger than we ever imagined." Cole could only manage a tight, forced smile. Once they were alone in the elevator, descending from the heavens of the boardroom, back to the real world, the silence was thick and heavy. "You met her before," Ben stated. It wasn't a question. Cole didn't answer. He just stared at his reflection in the polished steel doors. But he didn't see his own face. He saw a waitress, a leaking pen, and 2 crumpled dollar bills. Finally, he spoke, his voice a low, ragged whisper. "Get me everything you have on her. The real file, not the ghost story." "I already am," Ben said softly. "But Cole, I don't think a data file is going to help you with this. This isn't a business problem anymore." Cole's hands clenched into fists at his sides. For the first time in his professional life, he had lost control. Completely. The power had shifted so suddenly and so absolutely that he was still reeling from the vertigo. He had built his empire on the belief that he could see everything, predict everything, and he had been brought to his knees by the one person he had refused to see at all. 2 days later, Cole sat in his stark, silent office, staring at the file on his screen. This time it wasn't a shadow. It was Natalie Finch in full, brilliant color. Stanford MBA, summa cum laude. Authored a groundbreaking thesis on sustainable hospitality. Fluent in 3 languages. Philanthropist. And for the past 6 months, a meticulously documented journey through the lowest-paying jobs in her father's empire. The file painted a picture of a woman who was the polar opposite of him, someone who sought to understand the world from the bottom up, not command it from the top down. His humiliation had cooled into a hard, dense knot of something he wasn't familiar with: introspection. His entire worldview had been predicated on a simple, brutal hierarchy. You were either powerful and worthy of his attention, or you were not. Natalie Finch had proven that his system of measurement was not just flawed, it was idiotic. He had misjudged the most important business partner of his life based on the uniform she was wearing. The thought was so galling, so fundamentally embarrassing, that it eclipsed the potential damage to the deal. This was a wound to his ego, to the very pool of his identity. He knew what he had to do. An email wouldn't suffice. A phone call was too cowardly. He picked up his phone and called her assistant. He didn't demand a meeting. He requested one. The shift in his own language felt strange, like wearing an ill-fitting suit. She agreed to see him. Not in a boardroom, not in a restaurant, but at a small, neutral cafe in the West Village, not far from her home. When he arrived, she was already there, sitting at a small table with a cup of tea. She was dressed in simple jeans and a sweater, looking more like a graduate student than a COO. She looked up as he approached, her expression calm and unreadable. He sat down, the air thick with unspoken history. He had rehearsed a dozen corporate-style apologies, all focusing on the deal and the partnership. But looking at her now, seeing the person, and not the title he knew, they would all ring hollow. "Miss Finch. Natalie." He began, his voice rough. He stopped. The words felt inadequate. He took a breath and decided for once to be completely, brutally honest. The apology I owe you isn't about the meeting the other day. It's about the other night, at Aurelia. She listened, her hands wrapped around her warm cup, saying nothing. There is no excuse for my behavior. He continued, looking her directly in the eye. It wasn't just rude. It was dehumanizing. I didn't see a person. I saw a function, and I dismissed you. It was arrogant, it was contemptible, and it was a profound failure on my part, both personally and professionally. He expected a flicker of satisfaction from her, a moment of victory. He got none. She simply nodded slowly, considering his words. Do you know why I was really working there? Mr. Smith, she finally asked, her voice quiet. The file says you were auditing your company's operations, he answered. Partly, she conceded, but it was also a test, for myself and for this partnership. I wanted to see if the philosophy of Vortex Innovations, this obsession with ruthless efficiency, had a place in a business built on human connection. I needed to know what kind of man I was getting into business with, not in the boardroom, but when the mask was off. A cold dread even deeper than what he'd felt during the reveal seeped into Cole's bones. My experience as your waitress that night, she said, her gaze unwavering, told me everything I needed to know. It showed me a man who believes that a person's worth is tied to their perceived status. A man who wouldn't value the doorman, the housekeepers, or the chefs who are the lifeblood of my company. And based on that interaction, I wrote a formal recommendation to my father and the board to terminate the partnership agreement. Cole felt the floor drop out from under him. The deal he had considered a done thing had been dead before it even began. He had personally sabotaged his own legacy. I told them, Natalie continued, that your technology was brilliant, but your cultural philosophy was poison to our brand. That a partnership with you would rot Finch Holdings from the inside out. The recommendation is sitting on my father's desk right now. He was speechless. He had come here to apologize for a personal failing, not realizing it had nearly cost him everything. So why am I here? He finally managed to ask, his voice barely a whisper. Why take this meeting? Because she said, leaning forward slightly. What you did in the boardroom was interesting. You were humiliated, you were exposed, and you didn't lash out, you didn't get defensive, you fell apart. That showed me something. It showed me there might be a crack in the armor. It showed me there might be a man inside the algorithm. My father believes in second chances. I am willing to consider one. She leaned back. The offer, the lifeline, hung in the air between them. But it came with a price, and it wasn't monetary. The deal, as you proposed it, is dead, she stated plainly. If we are to move forward, it will be on new terms, a new philosophy. We will draft a new charter for the joint venture, one that puts employee welfare and customer dignity on the same level as profit. We will build your technology around our people, not the other way around. And you will have to learn our business, not from a spreadsheet, but from the ground up. She took a sip of her tea. I want you to spend 1 week, not as Cole Smith, the billionaire, but as an anonymous trainee. You will work one day as a bellhop, one day with housekeeping, and one day as a waiter in the very restaurant where we first met. You will wear the uniform, and you will learn the names of the people you have until now considered invisible. It was an audacious, almost insulting proposal, to ask a man of his stature to perform manual labor. To become one of the nameless, faceless people he had built his career on ignoring. His old self, the man from a week ago, would have laughed in her face and walked away. But that man had been shattered. Cole looked at Natalie, at this woman who had so completely and thoroughly outplayed him, who had stripped him of his arrogance and was now offering him not just a business deal, but a chance at redemption. He saw the strength in her, the integrity and the profound wisdom of her perspective. He thought of his empty penthouse, his life of sterile transactions, and the absolute humiliation of being so powerful, yet so incredibly blind. Slowly, deliberately, he nodded. "Okay," he said, his voice firm for the first time that day. "When do I start?" A small, genuine smile finally touched Natalie Finch's lips. "Your uniform will be ready on Monday." The real partnership had just begun. Monday morning arrived, not with the familiar sterile chime of Cole's smart home assistant, but with the jarring blare of a simple alarm clock set for 5:00 a.m. In the sprawling silence of his penthouse, Cole stood before his walk-in closet, a cavern of bespoke suits and designer labels. He ignored them all. Lying on his bed was a simple package that had been delivered the night before. Inside was a crisp polyester uniform, the dark maroon blazer and black trousers of a Finch Grand Hotel bellhop. The fabric felt coarse and foreign against his skin, a world away from the soft Italian wool he was used to. It was a costume for a different life, and as he put it on, he felt the stripping away of his own identity. Cole Smith was gone. Today he was just Cole the trainee. His first day was a masterclass in controlled chaos. The hotel lobby was a whirlwind of activity, and his supervisor a stern, wiry man named Hector, who had been working there for 30 years, moved through it like a conductor. Hector's instructions were sharp, fast, and unforgiving. Trainee cart on the right, never the left. Spine straight. Smile, but don't show your teeth so much you're not a shark. Hector barked, not even looking at him. Cole, who could command a boardroom of 100 people with a single glance, found himself clumsy and inept. The luggage cart seemed to have a mind of its own, bumping into gilded columns and expensive suitcases. His first big task was assisting a wealthy family checking out. The father, a man in a flashy watch who reminded Cole painfully of his former self, barked orders and treated him as if he were part of the furniture. "Careful with that one, it's alligator," the man snapped, pointing to a suitcase that cost more than Hector's yearly salary. As Cole loaded the bags, the man's young son dropped a sticky lollipop on the polished marble floor. "Clean that up," the man said to Cole, without a hint of apology, before turning back to his phone. The old Cole would have incinerated the man with a glare. The new Cole, the trainee, simply found a cloth, knelt, and wiped the sticky mess from the floor, the heat of shame rising in his cheeks. For the first time he felt the sting of casual, thoughtless condescension from the other side. It was a surprisingly sharp pain. But later that day, he helped an elderly woman with her single worn suitcase. She was nervous, telling him it was her first time in a big city. He took his time, pointed out the features of her room, and showed her how to work the television. She pressed a $5 bill into his hand, her wrinkled fingers warm against his. "Thank you, young man." "You've been so very kind," she said, her smile genuine. That simple, heartfelt gratitude hit him with more force than closing a 9-figure deal. It was real. It was human. His day with housekeeping was even more humbling. He was paired with a woman named Maria, a mother of 3, who worked 2 jobs to put her oldest through college. She taught him the precise, almost ritualistic art of making a bed with perfect hospital corners, of cleaning a bathroom, until every surface gleamed, of leaving a room so pristine it felt like no one had ever been there before. The work was physically grueling. By noon, his back ached, and his hands were raw from the cleaning chemicals. He saw the sheer, relentless effort that went into creating the effortless luxury he had always taken for granted. While they cleaned, Maria talked. She spoke of her children, of her pride in her work, of the little community she had with the other housekeepers. "We are a family here," she said, smoothing a pillowcase. "We look out for each other. We see everything. We know who the kind guests are and who the messy, angry ones are. A room tells you a lot about a person." Cole thought of the hundreds of hotel rooms he had stayed in over the years, the casual mess he'd left behind, without a second thought, never once considering the person who would come in to clean it all up. He wasn't just an executive in a uniform anymore. He was a witness to the invisible engine of human effort that made his world possible. The final trial was his shift as a waiter back at Aurelia. The familiar scent of truffle and ambition was now mingled with the smell of stress and burnt butter from the kitchen. The restaurant manager, a precise and demanding man named Julian, ran the floor like a military operation. Cole was on drink duty, and his hands, accustomed to the weight of a Mont Blanc pen, fumbled with the delicate stems of wine glasses. He spilled a tray of water, earning a sharp rebuke from Julian that made him feel 2 inches tall. Then he saw her. Natalie. She was seated at a discreet table in the corner, not dining, but observing. Her presence wasn't a threat. It was a silent question. Are you learning his defining moment came when he was assigned to a table of 4 tech investors' men exactly like his old friends. They were loud, arrogant, and dismissive. They snapped their fingers to get his attention. They complained about the temperature of the wine. They barely made eye contact, seeing him not as a person, but as a function exactly as he had once seen Natalie. He felt every slight, every condescending tone, every impatient sigh. He gritted his teeth, kept his composure, and served them with a quiet professionalism that was born not of training, but of a new, deeply personal empathy. At the end of the week, exhausted, sore, and profoundly changed, he didn't go back to his penthouse. He went to the Finch Holdings tower. He wasn't wearing a bellhop uniform or a waiter's apron. He wasn't wearing a Tom Ford suit either. He was in simple slacks and a button-down shirt. He felt for the first time like himself. He found Natalie in her office reviewing architectural plans. She looked up, her expression neutral. "I'm done," he said, and she asked simply. He didn't offer a simple apology. Instead, he put a folder on her desk. "Hector in Bell Services needs a new ergonomic luggage cart system. The current ones are causing back problems for the senior staff. Maria and the housekeeping team on the 14th floor have a faulty supply elevator adding 20 minutes to their room clearing time. And the point-of-sale system Julian uses at Aurelia is outdated. A software upgrade would reduce order errors by 30% and significantly lower staff stress during the dinner rush." He paused, taking a breath. "I came to you a week ago to talk about a partnership built on data. But I was missing the most important data points, the human ones. I'm ready to talk about that now." Natalie looked from the folder back to his face. She saw the exhaustion in his eyes, but she also saw a light that wasn't there before, a humility, an awareness. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a quiet, hard-earned strength. She stood up and extended her hand. "Welcome to the team, Cole," she said, and this time the smile that reached her eyes was warm and genuine. They signed the new partnership agreement the next day. It was a document that fused Vortex's powerful analytics with a new unbreakable charter of employee dignity and customer respect. As Cole added his signature using a simple, reliable ballpoint pen, he knew he wasn't just signing a business deal. He was signing a treaty with a better version of himself, a man who had learned that to truly reach the top, you first have to understand the view from the ground floor. In the end, Cole Smith's greatest lesson didn't come from a stock market win or a corporate takeover. It came from the weight of a luggage cart, the ache in his feet after a 12-hour shift, and the simple, profound act of looking a person in the eye and saying thank you. He learned that true value isn't found in a bank statement, but in the dignity of a job well done, and that respect is the only currency that truly matters. The partnership between Vortex and Finch didn't just become successful, it became revolutionary, blending cutting-edge technology with a deep, newfound humanity. Cole never looked at a service worker the same way again, because he had been one. He remembered their names because he finally understood that everyone has one. If this story of humility and second chances resonated with you, and you believe that kindness is a strength, not a weakness, please take a moment to hit that like button. Share this video with someone who might need to hear it, and if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel for more stories that explore the complexities of the human heart. Your support means the world to us. Thank you for listening.